rise for a pledge of allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here we need a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a public comment session. Anybody wish to speak? Public comment? Seeing none. Now we have a public hearing. So the chief will present the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023.
Okay, the Fire Commission's budget proposal for fiscal year 23 is as follows. First, we'll do a recap of our essential services. Of course, in addition to fire suppression and 911 advanced life support emergency response, we also are responsible for hazardous materials and disaster mitigation, marine and waterfront safety and rescue. In fact, we are the sole asset on the river responsible for anybody that falls in the water. And we work with the Coast Guard and Marine Patrol in those efforts. Fire prevention and inspection, emergency management, as has been shown in the last 2 years in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and community services, which encompasses fire education and school visits and such. The goals of the department have been the same as the last 2 years that I've been here, and maintain and strengthen the reliable delivery of essential emergency and non-emergency services, promote the safety of the community and employees through comprehensive education and training, provide effective, efficient, customer-centered services, minimize the risk of life and property through proactive planning, education, and enforcement of applicable codes and standards. Our position summary for fiscal year 23, full-time staff stays the same as it has the last 2 fiscal years. You'll notice a change in part-time positions. We were able to remove an account clerk part-time position that was primarily used for ambulance billing purposes. We've had a wholesale change in the way that the third-party ambulance biller and the hospital communicate, which has rendered the position of a part-time account clerk for those purposes unnecessary in our department, so we were able to reduce that position. Our only part-time position now is that of the fleet mechanic. Our trends for calls for service over the last 11 years, you see there was a steady increase between 2013 and 2019, and then the familiar COVID dip that you see in a lot of graphs and line charts nowadays. And then in this past year, the numbers have started to increase back up. Not quite to the 2018-19 levels, but they are trending upward. Our December runs were higher than our January runs were higher than that of December, which were higher than that of November. This chart reads the red line is fire runs only, the blue line is EMS runs only, and the yellow line includes those 2 runs in addition to runs that require additional manpower or apparatus at medical aid calls. Our budget year fiscal 23 requests, the impacts of the request are primarily and most importantly an increase in all non-administrative wages by 5%. And the need for this is to be competitive in what is becoming an even more specialized job market. Our starting pay for our firefighters is amongst the lowest in the state, and it's starting to, and has been, impacting our ability to recruit and retain quality personnel. In fact, over the last 3 years I've been chief, we've had to remove or terminate 8 firefighters within their first year of probation due to not being able to complete the quarterly requirements and competencies that are required of them to become a permanent firefighter. And this after we've even reduced the or lowered the standard for hiring these firefighters as far as their EMS level. We primarily we required an advanced EMT up until 2 years ago, and we reduced that requirement to a basic EMT to get more firefighters in the door. This also brings firefighters and officers closer to the average wage amongst comparable cities and towns, and I'll show you a chart in a moment that will really demonstrate how far behind our firefighters are amongst the state average and the state median as far as in regards to other full-time fire departments in the state. And again, this will help to attract more qualified and experienced firefighters and lateral transfers from other departments. Also, an impact of the FY23 budget request is an increase in our leave coverage accounts. Back in fiscal year 20, we were approved to hire an additional 4 firefighters so that we could have a total of 15 firefighters per shift, 3 officers and 12 firefighters. Since that time, and at that time, the 5-year plan was to eventually increase that workforce to 16 with a minimum of 15. However, in order to do that, in order to increase our minimum staffing, we need to increase the coverage accounts for annual leave, sick leave, and workers' comp. We were going to start that 5-year plan with incremental increases over the next 5 years. However, in fiscal year 20 and 21, the impact of COVID has slowed that. So we want to get back on track this year and increase those coverage accounts to allow us to move to a gradual increase from 13 minimum to 14 minimum. And this will be our first measurable increase in the overtime account for the past 3 fiscal years. And I will note that with these 2 increases, there are no new programs or positions being proposed, only looking to strengthen the force that we have and attract more firefighters into the door. This wage comparison is just one example of the need to adjust the wages of our firefighters. The orange bar is the average of our firefighters. Our firefighters are wage scaled over 3 different ways through EMT basic, EMT intermediate or advanced, and EMT paramedic, and this number represents an average of those 3 starting pay. And the yellow bar is the New Hampshire state average of those same average pay grades amongst New Hampshire fire departments, and the green is the median, meaning half or above that, half or below that. As you can see, that we are quite a ways behind, and we need to catch that back up in order to attract quality personnel. The summary of expenditures for this year's fiscal year 23 request. You can see the increase in the salaries is $235,304, or 5.6% over fiscal year 22. And then in our overtime, which is the coverage accounts that I spoke about, is $96,000, or 13.6% over last year. Other impacts of the budget, of which are out of our control, are the increase in retirement to $123,725, or 6.9%, and health insurance is 22.5% for $245,000. The above columns represent contractual obligations, which makes up 94.68% of our budget, leaving 5.32% for essentially what is overhead and what we can spend to run the department, keep the lights on, keep the trucks running. Without the wage adjustment, our request would still include the increase in the coverage accounts. It would bring that request down to a 6.01 from a 7.7% over last year. However, I would emphasize that my primary goal would be to present a budget that includes the wage adjustments and the coverage accounts increases. So our total department budget request will be $10,572,125. This represents a $755,704 increase over FY22, or 7.70%. Again, the effects on the budget are the 5% wage adjustment to be competitive and comparable to other departments in the state. And I would note that that increase would be split over the fiscal year, meaning half of that wage adjustment would happen on July 1 of the fiscal year, and half would come on January 1 of the fiscal year to help defray some of that cost. And then again, the increase in ship coverage accounts, emergency recall, earned time and workers' comp, for a total of 13.6% over FY22. This budget maintains the current level of service, stations, and resources. It incrementally increases minimum staffing from 13 to 14. And again, it improves our ability to hire and retain quality personnel. A 5-year strategic plan, which was derailed two years ago now, to continue to strengthen and maintain the reliable delivery of essential emergency and non-emergency services, so that we're able to provide one staff fire truck and one staff ambulance in each of the 3 geographic response zones of the city in each of our stations. And then to appropriately fund the salary, benefits, and shift coverage lines to ensure that those 15 on-duty firefighters and officers are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That concludes the budget presentation. If there are any questions, happy to answer them.
How many openings are at the Portsmouth Fire Department now? And do you anticipate any coming from retirements and such?
The question is, how many openings do we have in the department right now? We are looking to hire to cover 8 positions right now. And we anticipate at least one more retirement, but it hasn't been announced.
All right.
Any other questions?
That's all.
Is the 8 including the 13 to 14 for 1 minute or 1 month?
They would bring us up to our budgeted allowance of 15 on duty. The 13, 14 is the minimum staffing that we would be able to carry.
So the 8 would bring you back to minimum staffing.
8 would bring us back to having 15
15.
on each shift. Through it?
Questions?
No.
Just a couple, Chief.
Sure.
On the essential services, outside of COVID, right, for the last couple of years, has there been any other increase in those areas that we have done? I feel like this has grown over the years, and we just keep adding more activities or services. Maybe they're just different icons here, but.
The question is, has our mission grown or expanded
We're
over
doing
the
more.
years? I would say we're doing more of the same essential services that we always have, with the exception of with the emergency management portion of that essential service. That fell under the COVID response, fell under emergency management, which entailed, as you know, COVID-19 testing, COVID-19 vaccine clinics, and whatever else we could do to help the community and the state and the health networks push out that message or the vaccines themselves.
And then on the 5% wages projection, I mean, being competitive is important, right? Like this is not a COVID issue. We've had this problem even before COVID. Like I've heard it even before you were chief. Go ahead.
In addition to, I spoke about the 8 firefighters that we had to release from our probation because they weren't meeting the competencies. We've also had 4 firefighters leave our department to other fire departments for better pay. And we've also had 2 firefighters, after receiving their conditional offers of employment, which would state what they make, turn us down because they either weren't willing to take the pay cut or they had a job offer that paid more. As an example, the city of Concord last week put an ad out for a firefighter, paramedic. They do the same exact thing we do, similar sized fire department, a little bit bigger, but same job. And their starting pay for a paramedic was $10,000 more than we can offer. And as you're aware, the cost of living in the Concord area is easily 2/3 less than the cost of living in our area.
Sure.
So we need to do a better job at being competitive. I think it's pretty well known. It's well known amongst our rank and file here and us in the administration. I think it's pretty well known amongst the city as well too, the city staff and city management, that we need to be able to offer a more competitive package to get more qualified firefighters in the door. And we owe it. I feel as the chief that we owe it to the existing firefighters and officers that are here, as well as the citizens and the public that we serve, that we bring in the highest quality firefighters that we can to, you know, to carry this, you know, this you know, tradition of service that we carry here into the future.
I heard a lot of quality in that statement, right, and qualified. And if we're not getting that, what is the risk that we have to the
Well-
public and to everybody here? And there's a cost to that.
There's, well,
Education costs.
primarily there's a cost to that.
Yeah.
There's a cost to that. I mean, these 8 firefighters that, you know, didn't make it through probation, let's say the average time that they were here, you know, amongst the 8 of them was 6 to 7 months. That's 6 to 7 months of one-on-one training that, you know, essentially just was a waste. There were costs involved in outfitting them, in their gear, and onboarding them, you know, so there's that cost.
Yeah, those are hard costs.
Those are hard costs, and I'm not willing to water down or reduce the requirements in that 1 year of probation. I just think that would be a disservice to everybody, the people that we serve and the people that serve the people we serve.
But I also think it puts the teams at risk when you're not getting qualified candidates.
Right, that's what I meant.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And then the only other one is the budget. I think you have it up right now. Just to call out of note, like 6.35 without the 5, I think it's 6.35 without the 5% is higher than it typically is at status quo. But I think a lot of that is around retirement and health insurance and things. We don't have any control over that. Those are given to us. Is that accurate?
That's accurate,
Okay.
right. And I understand that, you know, a 7.7% over last year is going to be a sticker shock to taxpayers, to counselors, to perhaps yourselves as commissioners. But understand that over the last 2 fiscal years, we have held to an increase in our budget request only to that which we needed to cover because of fixed costs, which were out of our control.
Yep.
And again, our coverage accounts haven't changed in the last 3 fiscal years. We've maintained a 0 increase in those, and which just mean, you know, it's unfortunately we have to catch up at some point. And knowing, I think everybody knew at some point over the last 2 years that at some point we're going to have to catch up. And as you're aware, the cost of inflation now is skyrocketing, and you know, we need to catch up to that too.
Yeah. Highest in 20 plus years, right? I have no further questions.
Just one, Chief. If, on the 911 ALS emergency response that we have here under essential services, what do you call lift assist, unlock doors, PD requesting behavioral problems? Is there another category that we can put that in? I mean, that's
Because we're not
Well,
transferring.
that's
Yeah,
non,
I mean-
that's non-emergency.
You sort of covered a range of things there. A lift assist, it may fall under community service, it may fall under a medical aid call. I mean, a lift assist, what comes in as a lift assist could be something much more serious. So that's treated as a medical aid call unless it is truly a lift assist, and then it's, you know, that falls under community service. Lockouts, community service. Just those are the types of, I mean, 911 and advanced life support response obviously is a true medical emergency that we're responding to. And
Just looking for a way to get more information on that page. Because people don't know about all, unless you listen to it, or
Right.
watch the guys in action, you don't hear it.
I could fill a few pages of the things that that don't fall into a category here that we do, you know, almost every day in
The cat in the tree and the
yeah,
wire down,
all that stuff. Wires down.
And I think that.
water in my basement.
Yeah, I think that goes along with my first question was, we have these essential services, they're very large buckets, and each one of them in itself has grown over the years. I mean, fire prevention, like alone, has grown, and as the city is growing, more and more of that is happening. The education, community services, and the adding of the EMS, I'm seeing more marine and waterfront calls come in, right? Like, so each one of those has continued to grow, even though you still show the 7 icons of buckets.
Right. the fire service has become a catch-all for anything that a person doesn't know what, if they don't know what to do, they call us, 911, and we'll show up. And whether or not we know the answer, we'll try to find it. And, we just do our best at solving whatever problem they have right now. And a lot of times, that's just, they return from the hospital from a hip injury, and they need help getting to the second floor of the home. And there's literally no one else that's gonna help them. So we're gonna show up in our ambulance, and we're gonna have 2 firefighters get off with a specialized chair to bring them upstairs and make sure that they're all set and that they can get to where they need to get to without falling, and do a little education on fall risk, and they're gonna go back in service. And that's an example of a community service that doesn't really fall under, anything here, but is an important service, and people remember that.
I just had 2 things. So it appears that every time you're called, you do respond, right? No matter what the call is, somebody from the group, somebody from the fire department goes to do something with them. So we don't
Sure.
turn away calls, we don't prioritize. I'm sure if there's multiple calls, there's some prioritization, but the fact that the fire department responds to everything that other people can't or won't or don't know what to do, they call the fire department. And the second thing is, in lowering a standard for hiring, so sometimes the public companies that are out there, they'll lower their standards to get more people through the door. You've taken one step for that, and I don't think it's fair to the taxpayer. It's absolutely not fair to the people of the Portsmouth Fire Department. They've worked pretty darn hard to get here, maintain those. There's a pride that's involved with that, but it's also a safer department because of that. So I hope that someone doesn't put out, well, just lower your standards some
Right.
more to hire. I have no interest in that. I can't speak for the other commissioners, but I'm pretty sure they sing the same song. And I know you and members of the department that don't want to do that. Nobody wants to work with somebody next to them in this line of work that doesn't have the proper training and things, and you won't let that happen, actually.
No, it's not ideal. I mean, like I said, we lowered the EMS standard to come through the door, but it's important to note that they have to have that advanced EMT as a condition of employment within 1 year.
Right.
So after the first year, if they pass that course, then, they're as qualified as anyone else that came through the door.
Sure.
But that was a decision made between labor and management to allow that minimum level of EMS requirement through the door, because we felt we were missing quality people, meaning people of good character, because they didn't have that advanced EMT yet. And, given them, if we found, potential candidates that had a character of which we were looking for, and they were able to get that certification within 1 year, then that would be a win for us. And it did open up the door, I think, we've hired a few that turned out to be, that turned out to be the case.
That's good. Thank you.
So further questions?
All right.
We need a motion to approve and send to City Council the proposed budget fiscal year 2023.
I make the motion that the commission approve this budget as presented, with increases as presented. Certainly have been reasonable discussions and reasonable circumstances to consider all that was just explained to us.
I wholeheartedly second.
All in favor?
And
Aye.
the motion to include that this be passed to the city manager, am I correct?
Lisa,
City manager, because then she has to, yeah.
and I'll meet with her next week, I believe.
yeah.
Discuss.
I'm including that.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And I second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Need a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to
So
close the
moved.
public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public Public hearing has been closed. Moving on to the next agenda item, we have a recognition